The air in the courtroom hung heavy with the weight of unspoken grievances, a palpable tension that seemed to vibrate between the two individuals standing before the bench. I, Judge Ebony K. Williams, adjusted my position, my gaze steady and impartial as I observed the interplay between the plaintiff, Mr. Mike Graff, and the defendant, Ms. Lisa Fuller. This was not merely a dispute over technology or privacy. It was a fractured narrative of co-parenting, a story about the messy, complicated intersection of personal boundaries and the responsibilities of raising a child in a digital age. Mr. Graff stood with a posture that suggested he felt the world was conspiring against him. He was a man who clearly prided himself on his intentions, yet he struggled to reconcile those intentions with the reality of his actions. Beside him, Miss Fuller remained composed, a woman who carried the weary look of someone who had spent a decade navigating a relationship that refused to settle into a peaceful rhythm. Mr. Graff, you have laid out a claim for $5,000, citing emotional distress and an invasion of privacy, I stated, my voice measured and firm. You speak of trauma, of post-traumatic stress disorder, and you place the burden of that suffering directly upon Ms. Fuller. But as we sit here, the lines of accountability are blurred. You admit to a breach of agreement regarding the phone, yet you frame your own actions as an attempt to appease your son, while painting Ms. Fuller as the aggressor. Ms. Fuller, your turn, I directed, turning my attention to her. You claim the installation of the software was a necessary response to the introduction of a device you and Mr. Graff had collectively decided against. I need you to explain the rationale behind your decision, not just as a mother, but as a person who felt compelled to monitor a device that, by all accounts, was being shared between a father and his son. Ms. Fuller took a breath, her voice clear and devoid of the erratic energy that Mr. Graff displayed. Your Honor, for 10 years, we have lived in this cycle. We agree, and then, without warning, the agreement is dismantled. When I discovered he had given our 10-year-old a smartphone, I was terrified. We live in a world where children are exposed to risks we cannot even fully quantify. I did not want to monitor him. I wanted to protect him. When I realized the phone was also being used by his father, and that the phone contained information that could potentially endanger or influence the environment I was trying to cultivate for my son, I felt I had no choice. I installed the software to ensure that the environment our son was stepping into was one I understood. Mr. Graff interjected, his voice rising in agitation. But those were private messages, Ms. Fuller. My private life has nothing to do with our son. You had no right to look through my deleted texts, to read about my relationship with my former girlfriend, and then use that information to harass me. I held up a hand to silence him. Mr. Graff, let us address the fundamental issue of expectations. When you provide a device to a 10-year-old, a device that you simultaneously use as your own personal extension, you are creating a compromised space. You cannot claim an absolute expectation of privacy on a tool that serves as a bridge between your household and the household of your co-parent, especially when that bridge was built against a prior agreement. The courtroom was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning. I continued, my words intended to cut through the noise of their bickering. This is not a matter of simply dividing $5,000. This is a matter of recognizing that every decision you make individually ripples through the life of your son. You, Mr. Graff, sought to be the fun parent by providing the phone, yet you did so at the expense of trust. You, Ms. Fuller, sought to maintain control by installing surveillance, yet you did so at the expense of transparent communication. I looked from one to the other, seeing the reflection of their own choices in their eyes. We often think that justice is about finding a winner and a loser, a party who pays and a party who is compensated. But true justice, the kind I strive to uphold, is about finding the path toward integrity. If you want to move forward, if you truly want to heal from the stress you both feel, you must abandon the desire to hold the other accountable for the consequences of your own lack of coordination. Mr. Graff, your desire for therapy is valid, but I cannot assign the cost of your personal growth to Ms. Fuller when your own choices created the vulnerability you now decry. Ms. Fuller, your desire for security is understandable, but surreptitious monitoring is a bridge to nowhere in a co-parenting relationship. The silence grew contemplative. I saw the anger in Mr. Graff's face soften into something resembling realization, and I saw the rigid posture of Miss Fuller begin to relax. This, I knew, was the most important work of my court. It was not about the money, nor was it about the petty victories. It was about the slow, arduous process of teaching two people how to respect the boundaries they had failed to set. I continued, my voice calm and encouraging. You are both invested in the well-being of your son. That is the common ground upon which you must build. The phone is a tool, not a battlefield. From this point forward, you must decide what is in the best interest of a 10-year-old boy, not what allows you to score points against each other. If you cannot agree on the technology, then you cannot have the technology. It is that simple. I could see the weight of the moment pressing upon them. It was a realization that their struggle was self-imposed, a byproduct of their inability to communicate as adults who share the most precious responsibility of all. As I brought the gavel down, not in a display of power, but in a gesture of closure, I hoped they understood that they were leaving the courtroom not with a judgment, but with a challenge. They had the opportunity to stop being adversaries and start being parents. As the session drew to a close, I thought about the many lives that pass through this room. Every day, people come to me seeking validation for their anger, seeking a judge to tell them they are right and their counterpart is wrong. But my role is to remind them that being right is often less important than being decent. My North Carolina roots, the lessons I learned in Louisiana, the resilience I found on the West Coast, and the sharp clarity I developed in New York, all of it led me here, to this moment of trying to turn a conflict into a lesson. The courtroom began to clear. Mr. Graff and Ms. Fuller turned to each other, their initial hostility replaced by a hesitant, tentative conversation. It was not a victory, but it was a beginning. For me, the satisfaction of the day was not in the resolution of the $5,000 claim, but in the potential for a new way of living for a small boy who deserved better than the shadow of his parents' disagreements. I gathered my notes, feeling the weight of the robes on my shoulders, a constant reminder that the law is not just a collection of rules, but a living, breathing commitment to the integrity of the people it serves. As I left the bench, I felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. The work was never easy, and the solutions were never perfect, but as long as there was the possibility of a better understanding, there was hope. And in this world, hope is the most powerful tool for justice that any of us could ever possess. I walked out of the courtroom, my mind already preparing for the next story, the next set of lives, and the next opportunity to remind everyone who entered that fairness, respect, and shared humanity are the true foundations of our collective freedom. The day had been long, but the journey toward understanding was a marathon, not a sprint, and I was honored to be the one to guide them, step by painful step, toward the light of resolution.